Pearls for Pigs continues tonight with the second installment in a series of messages that we're in, where we've been addressing some modern day idols that compete for the throne of our hearts. And I want us to meet up in Luke chapter 12 here in just a few moments. We're going to start reading in verse 13. And to set it up for you just a little bit, in this passage, Jesus is teaching a very large crowd of people when someone in the crowd barks out a command to Jesus, which then sets the scene by which we will be addressing our next pig, the idol of money. Now, before those of you that were here this morning think this is a targeted attack, a ruse built up between me and our pastor, this is not an intentional target. This is not an intentional attack. He mentioned something to me in the office this past week. He's like, so with this idols thing, are you going to be talking about money at any point? And I was like, well, yeah. That's the plan. And I'd actually planned it for next Sunday. And he was like, well, since you are, just know I've got dibs. So I'm taking it this Sunday. And so I got to thinking about it, and I was like, well, maybe we can double up on it. Maybe I'll just move mine up a week, and we'll let God make a point out of it. And I didn't do that just because I thought it would be funny or because it fit or whatever. I said that in jest, and as I prayed over it through the week, I really feel like God just confirmed that this is where we needed to be at tonight. So you're going to get a double dose of the money talk today. We're going to pass around the plate 3 or 4 times before the service is over tonight. And I'm just kidding, but this is not targeted, this is not planned other than sovereignly. And so we're going to trust the Lord with it, and that He has a specific message for us tonight to continue to speak to our hearts about money. It is something that's evident in our lives. It is something that we have to manage. It is something that is a part of our lives, and if it's going to be so, we need to know how to handle it properly and in a way that honors God. So that's what we're going to dig into tonight with the idol of money. In Luke chapter 12, starting in verse 13, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." You know, I kind of admire just the boldness of whoever this person is. The fact that Jesus is sitting there teaching about some specific things. He's preaching gospel presence, repent for the kingdom is near. And all this guy, he's sitting out in the crowd, can think about while Jesus is sitting there is how he's got some kind of beef with his brother, who's apparently set up and is in line to receive all the inheritance from his father, and just decides to bark out to Jesus, "Hey, Jesus, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Which set Jesus up for a perfect response. He said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, here comes the teaching, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." I wonder if the moment Jesus said that, this guy's heart kind of got a little twinge in it. Jesus sees hearts, you know. And he told them a parable saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God." For the next few moments, I want to speak to you from the subject of fool's gold. So find somebody around you and tell them, don't be a fool. Don't be a fool. Jesus turned and said, "Fool, this night your life is required of you." Hey, I want to talk to the students in the room for just a few moments. To you college, to you young adults in the room, just for a few moments. Because some of you may be thinking, well, I'm tuning this one out again. I heard this morning. Doug talked about money, and he was right when he said, "Oh, I can tune this out because I'm not rich. I don't have any money." And you're thinking the same thing is going to apply tonight. And in a lot of ways, this message for you guys is for the future you. Because I get it. I know as a youth, I know as college students, I know as young adults, The only struggle you seem to have with money is not having any. And so you may feel like this doesn't really apply to me. Right? Like, how am I going to manage something I don't have? And so I want you to just lock in these truths tonight, because this idol may not have set up a throne in your life yet, but it could be in the process of construction. And you need to know, in wisdom moving forward, when money does become a more present part of your life, how you can handle it in a way that honors God. You don't find yourself in a position where you are bowing to a false thing, and it is running and ruining your life. So don't write these things out, because there is wisdom in this lesson for the future you. But for you adults in this room that do have a little bit of cash flow, we need to talk a little bit. We've all heard the saying, money makes the world go round. And in some ways, I guess that's true. It's one of those things that we do have to have in life. But when our perspective towards money turns into something that we pursue instead of something that we earn, we just took a dangerous turn towards idolatry. And you may be thinking, well, here we go again. I didn't get to tell Doug this morning, but I'm thinking it again tonight. Money just isn't that big of a deal to me. I don't know why y'all keep talking about it. I don't know why God placed it upon your heart to keep bringing it up, because it's just not that big of a deal to me. Yet I wonder how many of you chose a degree or a career field based off of salary potential. I wonder how many of you have gone into college or still in college, and you chose a career path based off of projected asset building instead of something that you're passionate about. You might have had a specific passion towards something, but when you sat down and you contemplated the trajectory of your life and the things that you want to have one day, you saw within that passion no potential for this. And so you decided to pick another path that you might not care nearly as much about, but you saw the financial ceiling of it and you thought, I'll go with that route instead. Even if it's something I'm not passionate, even if it's something I have to suffer through, the money will make it worth it. I can live the way that I want to live. It's funny, because I know some of you felt targeted by that, myself included, over the years in my life where money was a struggle. But the funny thing is, if we think about it in that context, you would never want to hear your doctor say, I'm just a doctor for the money. You would hope there's a little passion behind what he's doing for a living. Well, let's take a look at your scans here, just because I'm obligated to do so as a part of my job. And I'm going to get paid either way. So you see that dot right there? That's not good for you. Nobody wants to hear the doctor. You want there to be a passion behind the things that he's doing. And yet, why is it any different for our lives? We pursue things, we should, because God's placed a passion within us for those things. But so many times they get set aside. Why? Because whether we want to readily admit it or not, we idolize money. I never thought I'd struggle with the idol of money until I started earning some. And that's why I'm telling some of you younger people in the room tonight who think money isn't a struggle and money ain't going to be no thing in your life, wait until money is a little bit of a thing in your life, and then it might become a thing in your life. I never had an issue with it until I started making it. When I got out of college, I started working at Southwire. Dale Price hooked me up with a job, and it was good cash flow. And all of a sudden, money held a much more significant weight in my life than it ever had before. And so Jesus tells this parable about a man that had great wealth. I want you to notice that he doesn't describe the man by his wealth. He describes him as a fool. Why? Because this man's life was bound up in his things. It was bound up in his wealth and his stuff, his possessions. That's what Jesus pointed to and said, this is foolishness. This idol of money produced within this man a false sense of some things. And that's what I want us to focus in on tonight, is looking at this idolization of money and the false things. It's a false God with false promises. And that's what I want us to look at for a few moments tonight. So I want you to see the first thing is that it provides this false significance. If we go back and look at the account of this man's life in verse 16, Jesus describes some things. It says that the land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do, for I have nowhere to store my crops? And he said, I will do this. I'll tear down my barns, I'll build larger ones, and there I will store all my grains and my goods. So this man experiences a bountiful harvest. He has more than he can store at this point, which, by the way, side note, is a key indicator that it's past time to start sharing some. Some of us have a great surplus in our lives, but we're not sharing any of it. We're not relinquishing any of it. And yet we might sit here tonight and say, I don't idolize money. Well, do you not? You come into a surplus like this man has, and he's going to make a business decision. So he decides to build bigger barns for all of his goods, which by all accounts seems like a good business thing to do. It seems like a good investment, seems like a good financial decision. But like I said earlier, as Jesus is speaking to this man in the crowd who barks out, teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me, he tells a story and it's aimed at this guy's heart. Jesus sees hearts. We can say all we want to, but he can discern lip service and heart intentions. And so he's speaking to this man. He knows that he's got a money problem. He's got an idol problem. And this guy, that's all he cares about is money, 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 money. And so he begins to speak to the heart. And he does so through this parable of this man who is bound up in all of his possessions. And the thing is as we look at this guy and we listen to the way that he talks, we listen to the way that he's describing his situation. He's a rich man. He's in a time of surplus. He's in a time of harvest. And he thinks to himself, what should I do? I don't have anywhere to store my surplus. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to tear down bars. I'm going to build larger ones. And there I will store up all my grain and all my goods. So this man, he's bound up in all of his possessions. And we get the sense that the focus is purely upon himself. I'll build bigger barns. What am I going to do with my surplus? Look at all of my gain. Look at all that I have to my name. Look at all that I have to do, all that I have to store up, all that I have gained for myself. The purpose is solely upon this man. It is an inward focus. I'll build bigger barns. And this is why I say it provides a false sense of significance, because this man is putting all kinds of significance upon himself. I'll build bigger barns. In other words, everybody's going to see them. Everybody's going to see my big barns. Everybody's going to look around in town. They're going to see me tearing down my nice barns that I had that so many other people would have loved to have had. And they're going to see these bigger ones I'm going to build. I'm going to build bigger barns for myself. It's a look at me as much as it is anything else. These people are going to see how significant I am. They're going to see how important I am. They're going to see how worthy of attention I am. He thinks his significance, he thinks his status, he thinks his importance and his value is measured by his money and his stuff. Now let's get to the nitty-gritty a little bit. We develop this mindset because honestly we portray it on others. We see the size of their house. We look at the car that they drive. We look at the clothes that other people wear. We see the shoes on their feet, and by those things we project significance. We think because these people have these certain things, these certain elements are in their life, these abundant things are in their life, that they must be somebody. And it's funny that there's a great indicator of the fact that we have a struggle with our significance being bound up in things or money or wealth or possessions, because we'll make this statement when we look at it in other people's lives and see it. You know what we'll say? I think you know. You're just waiting on me to say it. Must be nice. And then we'll usually follow it up with a second comeback. Can't hide it. I tell you what, you can't hide it. Must be nice. Must be nice. Must be a struggle to have the blessings that we have and look over the top of them at everybody else's. Must be nice. Our significance is sunk in all of these things and thinking that if we don't keep up with the Joneses, then my life is insignificant compared to theirs. I don't need a new car, but my neighbor got one. I don't need to add on to my house, but my friends did. I don't have to have name brand products, but my cousins do. All of these things, they battle in our hearts for significance, thinking they add value, and we project that on people. And in the process of doing so, we project it upon ourselves. But the problem is, this is a false significance. Jesus tells them one's life does not consist in the abundance of things. So Jesus speaks directly to this. He says, "You are my creation." He sees. You got to understand how Jesus sees this. He sees a creation that He poured His heart and soul and love into forming and creating and placing God-valued, inherent upon their lives. And He sees them struggling with feeling significant. And He says, your life is not bound up in the abundance of things. All these possessions, all these things that you can build up for yourself, it does not add significance to your life. It does not create or bestow value. I did that the moment that I breathed my breath into your nostrils. And so it strikes at Jesus' heart, I think, because He sees us wrestling with things that we think are going to bring significance, when in reality He says they're insignificant. Your value, listen, is not equal to your bank statement. And I think some of us here tonight, we would be honest about certain things. If there was a threat to having each and every one of our bank accounts publicly shown in this room, a lot of us would want to reject the even possibility of that happening, because we feel like when people see the number beside our name, they're going to see us as less significant. It's not that we don't want people to know what we have. It's just that we'll get embarrassed of what people see that we have. Why? Why do we project that upon ourselves? Why do we have to think that what's beside my name or what I have in my account produces significance? Because we constantly project that upon other people. This is a false significance. This is what a false God does. It underdelivers. And Jesus says, "This is, you've got to understand, my guy." He's speaking to this guy in love. He's like, it's almost like, I don't think Jesus is passive aggressive, but He's giving this guy a subtle message. I know where you're going with this. You think that's going to bring significance. You think me telling your brother to share the inheritance is going to add value to your life, but it won't. Your life is not found in the abundance of things. Some of us could unburden ourselves greatly if we would learn godliness with contentment is great gain. And not worry so much about what your neighbor has or what your brother and sister has. I talked with our college students Wednesday night, and I was like, one of Satan's greatest tactics that he ever employed was to get us to try and focus on our apparent lack. To look around and see what everybody else has that we see to be lacking in our lives and think, man, God's favor, God's blessing is upon them, but it's not on me. That's a work of the enemy. God doesn't ever tell us to focus on our lack. He says, focus on your blessing. It's all that matters. Stop finding your value within this false idol, within this pig of money, because it is a false value. It is a false significance. It also provides a false security. If you look in verse 19, this guy, after he makes this investment, he builds his bigger barns. He dumps all of his grain, all of his possessions in there, and after he's done, he says, "I will say to my soul, so you have ample goods laid up for many years." This man takes all of his stuff and he stores them in a safe place for years to come. This is his retirement fund, so to speak. And I know we got some people in here tonight close to retirement. And that's awesome. This is by no means going to be an attack on retirement or enjoying years of labor and hard work that you have put in, but there is some value in this lesson for each and every one of us, especially those that are getting to this point in life. This man's stocking up his retirement fund. And at this point, this is where it gets really teachable for us as adults, I think. At this point, the idol of money produces a dangerous mindset of being self-sufficient. And a person who believes themselves to be self-sufficient has no need for God in their life. And it's dangerous because self-sufficiency produces spiritual deficiency. Once we become self-sufficient on ourselves, there's no prayer anymore. There's no crying out to God. There's no study of His Word. Everything begins to lack. There's no worship. There's no praise that flows from us to Him. There's no godly community that we keep ongoing in our lives. We begin to disconnect in all ways because I don't need God and I don't need God's people. I'm self-sufficient. I've got everything stored up for myself. I can depend completely upon myself. That's why everything begins to lack spiritually. That's why there's a deficiency spiritually, because I'm so self-sufficient, I'm no longer dependent upon God. I don't have to cry out and ask Him for my daily bread. I don't have to cry out and ask that He provide another job for me because I've got one, I'm here, and I'm good, and I'm getting bonuses, I'm getting raises, I'm getting promotions, I'm getting all these things. So all other spiritual aspects of our life begin to lack. That's why money is such a dangerous thing when we begin to idolize it and put a false sense of security in it, thinking that this is good, this is where I need to be. This is exactly the position that I always wanted to put myself in, because just like this guy, he feels safe now, he feels secure. I've got enough to take care of myself. All of his dependence is now placed on his abundance. I have ample goods laid up for many years. I'm set. Good for me. This idol will tempt you with feelings of security. Well, if I had more money, I wouldn't have to worry or be anxious. If I had more money, something unexpected happened, I could be prepared. I could handle it. I could take care of my family. They wouldn't have to worry if we had a crisis or we had an emergency or any of these things popped up. It would be fine. We could just handle it. We'd have the means. We'd have the resources to get it taken care of, and we wouldn't have to struggle in the process of it. And listen, there is wisdom in putting back. There's wisdom in being prepared. We shouldn't go out and just aimlessly spend every single dollar that we make mindlessly and in a poor way stewarding the things that God has brought into our lives. I get that. I'm not bashing on that whatsoever. I'm not saying you can't have a savings account. I got one. I'm not saying you can't put money into a retirement fund. I've got one. There's good wisdom in making sure that we steward our resources in a right way and to have some money set aside for when things do show up. But the thing is that when it becomes an idol in our lives, we'll take it to another level. We'll just keep hoarding and keep hoarding and keep hoarding and keep hoarding. It's like what Pastor talked about this morning. We hoard it. We just shovel it in there. Why? Because it gives us a sense of security in case something happens. I'm ready. I'll be okay. And the thing is when money becomes what we believe to be a safeguard, it's now become a sense of false security in our lives. Practical example. Who's got some cash? Anybody got a bill? Let me get a bill. I'm not going to steal it. It don't matter. You see on the back of that? What's that say?
We.
No. What's the whole thing say?
In God we trust.
In God we trust. It's funny we put that on the very thing that replaces our trust in Him so often. Why? Because it's a false sense of security for us. And so this guy says, I store all this up. Soul, I'm good. I got ample. I got a surplus. And he's placing all of his security in his money. And when we think we can do the same thing, the more that I have, the more secure I feel. The more safe I feel. The more prepared I feel. The more I'm ready to handle certain things in life. But it's a false sense of security. False sense of security. Jesus would go on and say, fool, this night, your life is still required of you. Listen to me. Money doesn't safeguard your soul. It don't buy you into heaven. It don't buy any family members into heaven. It's not going to safeguard your life from tragedy happening. There's no guarantee that in the safest places that you've put it, that it won't still be destroyed. James talked about it this morning. He said, you rich, you need to mourn and you weep. Why? Because your gold and silver is corroded. You know where corrosion happens? In a safe place. He said, you thought you were fine. You thought you were okay, but it's still rotted away. It's still temporal. It still won't last. Don't put your security in money. And don't worry about it. Because we serve a God who I'm pretty sure said at one point in time, I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. I'll take care of you. I'll be your refuge. I'll be your strength. I'll be your provider. Put your security in Him and in Him alone. Not in this false God of money. One last falsity it gives us. False God with false promises. And that's false satisfaction. After he stores it all up, and he talks about how he's got ample laid up for many years. In the last half of verse 19, within the context of his significance, his seeming security, he says, you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to relax. I'm going to eat. I'm going to drink. I'm going to be merry. This is what life is. This is living. High on the hog. Everything that I need. It's a false sense of satisfaction. Towards the end of the story, Jesus tells us the man now says, I can eat, I can relax, I can drink, I can be merry. Now that I have plenty, I'm satisfied. It's time to enjoy it. But the truth is, he wasn't satisfied. He was not satisfied. I can prove it to you. Can I show you? Permission to prove it? Jesus, at the beginning of the story, said he was already rich. Go back and look at it. Verse 14, he tells this guy, man who made you a judge or arbitrator over you, and he said to them, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he told them a parable saying, the land of a rich man. There was no satisfaction for this man because he was already rich. The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And when he saw an opportunity for further gain, he took it, which tells me that in his richness, there was no satisfaction. If there was, he wouldn't have saw this opportunity and hoarded up even more for himself. But it does not satisfy. It does not bring contentment. Even though he was already rich, when the opportunity presented itself, he further gained himself. The reality is this: he was never going to be satisfied. And if the opportunity would have showed up again, if the next year the land would have produced plentifully again, you know what he would have done? He'd have tore them barns down all over again and built even bigger ones. It never satisfies. Never. He would have only added to the vast amount that he had already gained. Why? Because there is no satisfaction in the increasing of things. Listen to me. The more you feed an appetite for wealth and possessions, the hungrier it gets. Now that I have this house, now that I have this car, now that I have this pay grade, I can be satisfied now. Except you won't be. Some of us right now are living in houses that at the moment we bought them, it was the greatest blessing that had ever entered into our lives. Now it's one of our greatest burdens. I can't stand this house. We need to upgrade. That's what we need. We've been here long enough. It's time for something a little newer. Some of y'all right now are driving vehicles that at one time were the greatest blessing you had ever been given. But then what happens after a few years? Just a piece of junk. You know what I need? I need an upgrade. I need to go to the dealer. I need somebody to hook me up. Some of you at your jobs right now, when you came in at entry level and they said, we're going to pay you this, you were like, ah. But you've been there for 4 months and you're like, I need a promotion. This ain't getting it. I'm giving these people free labor around here. Cost of living. Don't they know how much it costs to live here now? This ain't fair. I'm going to sign up for union. We're going on strike. Now listen, I get it. There comes a time where our stuff wears out. And we do need an upgrade. Sometimes you do need a little bigger house. Your family's growing. Sometimes you do need an upgrade of a car. That check engine light, you don't even see it anymore. It's been on for so long. When your air don't work, your heat don't work, it is time for an upgrade. And there's nothing wrong with going and having that. And you work hard at a job. Even Paul said a worker's worth his wages. It's fine to better yourself. It's fine to work hard. It's fine to gain promotions. All those things are fine. Jesus is not condemning any of that. What Jesus does condemn, what he does convict us of, is the motivations of our heart behind those things. Is this where I'm finding my satisfaction? Is when I have these things, is this when I sit back and I'm like, you know what, now I've got it. Now I'm here. I'm going to relax. I'm going to eat. I'm going to drink. I'm going to be married. I'm going to enjoy the work of my hands is a false satisfaction. Listen, all that being said, this is what I want you to see as the big picture. Remember the title tonight? It's Fool's Gold. Tell that person beside you again, don't be a fool. Don't be a fool. It's fool's gold. Did you know that fool's gold is an actual thing? It's a mineral. It's called pyrite. And it bears the resemblance to and is often mistaken for real gold. And within the mining world, it's a term that they used for miners who thought that they had found a gold mine. And so they're digging, and all of a sudden they strike what they think is gold. But in reality, it was just pyrite. Just a mineral that has no value whatsoever. In the modern day world, actually, we've carried over a meaning for this. And in our modern day, it's an investment. But it's an investment that appears promising, but its underlying value equals nothing. That's what happens when you idolize money. That's what happens when we idolize possessions. When we place these things over God in our life, we look like fools because we're taking something that in reality has no value. We're placing it above the only treasure that exists in our lives. And God looks at us and he says, fools. That only looks promising towards significance. That only looks promising towards security. That only looks promising towards satisfaction, but there's no actual value to it. Jack Whitaker, he was already a millionaire when he won a $315 million jackpot in a lottery in West Virginia in 2002. The then 55-year-old West Virginia construction company president claimed that he went broke about 4 years later lost a daughter and granddaughter to drug overdoses, which he blamed on the curse of the Powerball win. He quotes and says, "My granddaughter is dead because of the money," he told ABC. You know, my wife had said she wished that she had torn the ticket up. Well, I wish that we had torn the ticket up too. Whitaker was also robbed of $545,000 sitting in his car while he was at a strip club 8 months after winning the lottery. He was quoted afterwards saying this, "I just don't like Jack Whitaker. I don't like the hard heart I've got. I don't like what I've become." Abraham Shakespeare was murdered in 2009 after he won a $30 million lotto jackpot. His brother Robert Brown told the News that Abraham always said he regretted winning the lottery. "I'd have been better off broke," he said, all the time to his brother. Donna Micken won $34.5 million in the New York State Lottery in 2007. She said the big win ruined her life and led her to emotional bankruptcy. Most of us think that winning the lottery is the ultimate fulfillment, but I found that wasn't the case. She wrote in a blog post, "If you ask me, my life was hijacked by the lottery." A Pentecostal preacher working as a stock boy at Home Depot got his prayers answered when he hit the $31 million Texas jackpot in 1997. At first, life was good. With Billy Bob, if that ain't the most Texas name I've ever heard in my life. Billy Bob reportedly quit his job, traveled to Hawaii, buying a ranch, 6 other homes, and new cars. He donated 480 turkeys to the poor, according to Time magazine, but like many others who win the lottery, he ran into financial trouble. Media reports say he eventually divorced and died by suicide. Shortly before his death, he told a financial advisor that winning the lottery is the worst thing that ever happened to me. Only Jesus brings satisfaction to your life. Only Jesus brings security to our lives. Only Jesus brings significance to our lives. As we finish up, I want to call your attention to one last little nugget of encouragement. If you were to look down below the passage that we just read, as soon as Jesus is talking to this crowd and he leaves, they disconnect from the scene. He pulls his disciples off to the side. And what's he tell them? "Hey guys, don't be anxious." Don't you think it's funny that right after this conversation about money, Jesus pulls his closest friends off to the side who he knows that compared to the world standards, they're going to be poor. They're going to struggle. They're going to learn what it means to ask for daily bread. And he says, let me tell you guys something. Don't you be anxious. What's he telling them not to be anxious about? About the things that the world says you need money to provide. Don't you worry about clothes. See those flowers? Don't you worry about groceries. You see those birds? I'll take care of you. Don't worry about money. And so as we finish up tonight, I think the challenge and the encouragement to us as a church, as the theme of this day has been just that, to be on our guard about our money. I think the challenge is to make sure that we are stewarding the blessings that God has given us. And realizing that regardless of what we might perceive as a lack compared to everybody else, your lack is in abundance compared to some people. And is stewarding those resources that God has given us for the building of his kingdom, for the glory and the honor of his name. That's the challenge. Are we going to steward the things that God has given us? And I think the encouragement too is Some of you need to be relieved of the burden of worrying and the anxiousness and the stress that money causes in your life. And listen, this is not a prosperity gospel church. It's the farthest thing from it. We're not going to tell you, nobody's going to tell you that giving your life to Jesus is going to lead to health and wealth. You're going to have your struggles. It's going to be difficult. I'm not saying you're not going to have to go to the food pantry one day. But I am saying that if you have to go there, God's still going to give you a can of soup. Paul told the believers that if I have food and I have clothing, with these I'm content. Stop worrying about the things that you don't have. Start thanking God for the things that you do.